Barry, this is, I think you've got some fans in the room, some family in the room.
How about that?
So, that are here to support you, so it's always good. You are the last talk of the day. We spent a lot of time talking about all of the things that are happening around freight. For those that aren't familiar with your business, give us a little bit of overview of what exactly you guys do.
Uh, I would say we're a turnkey logistics business. We provide services throughout the United States, into Mexico and Canada. We run at about 1,000 power units, 22 million square feet of distribution space, run our own IT group, and we also make tailor-made golf balls once in a while.
Oh, wow, okay.
In the manufacturing business. So we're excited about what we do, and it's a dynamic business, this transportation is.
Yeah, it's incredibly volatile, as we've all learned. Your business has been around for a while. You guys have been in business for many decades.
We've been in business since 1986, 38 years now, and enjoying every minute of it.
What has changed in that period of time from when you first started the business to what you're seeing today?
It's faster. Today we do business electronically, over the wire. It's not as much a relationship-based business, though we believe that relationships are still very important in the future of our company. So you have to balance dealing over the wire versus dealing personally with your clients.
Just the fact that everything is electronically negotiated today, in terms of tenders that are coming in, negotiation of freight rates done electronically versus relationship.
We've had some great experiences. I heard you talk a little bit about theft earlier, but we have an operation down in Houston, Texas. Had a driver come up, jumped out of the car, went into our guardhouse, zip-tied our guard, drove into the lot, picked up 2 trailers, and suddenly we owed our client $800,000 for that freight. So first thing I did was I went out and bought a bulletproof guardhouse, right, Phil? Put the bulletproof guardhouse in, and then we started taking steps to try to secure the freight. It wasn't too long, a couple of carriers showed up, and they gave us load numbers. Load numbers, guard looked at the load numbers, said, yep, come on in, pick up the loads, and they left. About 3 hours later, 2 more carriers come in, they give us the same load numbers, and we're like, what happened? So Phil's been instrumental in developing new technology that eliminates the ability of carriers to come into our operations and give it just a load number to us and pick up freight.
Yeah, freight fraud is it's become so exponentially a much bigger issue. We've talked about it a lot over the last couple of days. Phil, what exactly are you guys doing to mitigate that?
Well, one thing, we're obviously using the tools that are given to us, right? We've got, from a carrier standpoint, we've got some, what I would call redundant vetting processes, right? Where we're using, RMIS, highway, but at the same time as that, as we bring on new carriers, kind of going back to your point about we're just kind of going back to the old school where we're actually physically calling the carriers just to make sure that they're a legit carrier. So I think that we've implemented some what we call the 3-digit code process at a lot of our distribution centers, and we've translated that into our transportation side where it's just a confirmation that hey, this is who we think it is, and but it's always changing. Like I said, I think that a lot of the tools that are software platforms that are out there now they're constantly changing just because the game's changing constantly. So.
Yeah, I think what's new in the whole fraud game is the overseas organized criminals. And I think during COVID, all the outsourcing that went into really driving, companies had legitimate need to staff up and resource up using overseas resources to do that. The problem is what we've got out of that is people who actually understand the business now that frankly have found crime pays and unfortunately pays quite well.
Right.
We made the mistake of dealing with a small carrier, so this goes back to making sure that you know who you date, right? So we had a small carrier delivering TVs, kept shorting the bill of lading every time. When he delivered the TVs, there was 99 of them instead of 100. So this went on for months. Finally, the shipper called up and said, "You owe us about $2.5 million for all these TVs that are gone." And we're like, "Well, we have these bill of ladings. We picked them up. We delivered what was there." Well, the carrier had been modifying the bills of lading, shortening them. And so we went back after the carrier, and the carrier evaporated.
Wow.
Gone.
I think that's the problem, is just knowing that these I mean, we talked about it this morning, is anybody can buy an MC number. I mean, these things are sold on the black market, and it's hard to know whether you're dealing with a legitimate carrier or you're not. You talked about the tool sets. Cindy Lee, who runs a very small brokerage here in Chattanooga, probably has 15 brokers in her whole operation, talked about the most important part of her process, because one bankruptcy or one stolen load could potentially put her out of business.
Oh, yeah.
She talked about the human element when you're bringing not just the tool set, but the people in your team on how they're screening carriers. How are you guys? You talked about a 3-digit number. Is there any other piece of that you guys have implemented?
We're physically calling the carriers, which is something we actually just changed in the last 6 months. Some other thing is requiring like 4 kites and some of the tools, as far as tracking them from cradle to grave. We on the asset side, we use it for our outside carriers. We've actually, we'll use like CargoNet or anything that we can do to gather information on where the hot spots are, and we will actually go out and we'll get a lot for that specific area to find a safe haven for either the carrier or the driver. I mean, that's something else that we'd never really thought about, in years past. You go to a truck stop, and some other things that we've done is, if we do have to go to a truck stop, we try to do it in teams, and what that allows us to do is to actually park our trailers, back to back, to prevent some of the theft that we've seen.
I got all these wonderful stories to share with you, Craig, but we're bringing computers in from Mexico. Bring them in, cross the border, stop at the first truck stop, computers are gone. And this happened, maybe 4 or 5 times until...
Driver just gets out of the truck and immediately they take them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like they knew exactly where we were going to be.
Yeah.
So then you have to start analyzing what your entire, was it your dispatcher? Was it the border guard? Was it the driver? Was it
the shipper? I mean,
shipper.
oftentimes, there was talking to law enforcement. The vast majority of these cases is an inside job, whether it's in your operation, but oftentimes, you mentioned TVs. I remember we were hauling for a very large national, call it name brand big box electronics retailer, and they had a shortage problem that kept showing up in the warehouses, and they were really bad at inventory. This was in the mid-2000s. They weren't properly accounting for their own inventory, and they were short, and they realized after a year or so that they were short on all the TVs they thought they were supposed to have. So this is a problem because it's become, we talked about it earlier multiple times, is the authorities are so focused on other types of crime. Across the border, it's keeping the cartel and fentanyl and things like that out.
Yep.
Cargo crime, in their mind, just isn't a priority.
Right.
So how do you guys take, when action needs to be taking place, what are you finding is the best recourse?
We do use, like I said, there's communities out there, and a lot of times it's kind of best practices, but we're fortunate that we actually operate 5 different trucking companies, and what we do is collectively we work with one another, right? So what works for this company, we'll share that information. So we've kind of got our own community, right, where we can talk about best practices and try to figure out ways to prevent theft. But one of the ideas that the group brought to us was, so we have tracking devices, obviously, on our trucks and our trailers. Of course, that's the first thing they're going to pull off, right? So we had an idea is that we had a vendor that came to us, and they wanted to look at their tracking devices, and it's actually, it has a module actually inside the tire. So we're like, well, we could do this as a redundancy, right? So the guy comes in, rips the GPS off the trailer. I still have tracking, right? because it's embedded in that tire. It's two different products. So talking about redundancy and tracking, and that was one of the ideas that came out of our little weekly discussions.
Yeah,
So,
that's an interesting, I haven't
Yeah.
heard that one. It strikes me that that's an incredible, I mean, you guys have a lot of experience in the automotive and tire business, so you would know, you'd be you know, you have an enormous sort of perspective on how that would work.
yeah.
Tires move quickly. It's very easy to market a tire when you take it down the street, and we all need them.
Yeah, for sure. Barry, your business, you mentioned how big and extensive your warehouse operation is, which, you know, has become a really hot market for investors because of the attractiveness, but also from a shipper standpoint of having end-to-end logistics solutions. You've got trucking, you've got warehouse, things like you talked about doing some manufacturing. What does that look like? What is your business in terms of being that broad really bring you to customers?
Well, you know, we mentioned you know, a turnkey logistics provider. We're great at picking up our clients' products from the manufacturing plant and providing tracking from that point through the distribution center and all the way to their client in a real-time fashion. And it's a little bit of it's a niche business because, you know, when I talk to our folks, we're not in the logistics business, we're bankers. Our clients give us their money, and if we lose their money, we have to pay them back for it, right? So we are very sensitive to handling their freight, making sure our inventories are accurate, and making sure that we understand how to deliver it on time to the customers, because a lot of our windows for delivery are, within 10 minutes? Mm-hmm. And if we don't hit that 10-minute window, we're shutting down an entire plant, which costs, you know, $1 million an hour.
I have had the pleasure of, I don't know if I call it a pleasure, of shutting down the Chrysler plant. It was when Dr. Z, remember him? He was on commercials. He was the CEO of Daimler Chrysler. Was doing a plant tour in, I think it was in Ontario, Canada. And we were supposed to deliver, it was radio dials, but the whole plant was shut down when Dr. Z was doing his, so Chrysler 300 had been on the plant, and the driver shut down in some field. We thought he was dead because we couldn't get a hold of him through SATCOM. And finally, 18 hours, he resurfaces. The plant's been shut down for a period of time. And he's like, I fell asleep. And I'm like, dude, like, we were having the authorities trying to find you, but that's the problem with automotive. And you guys do a lot of automotive work, is just how intense the supply chain runs and how detrimental to their operations are if you're late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a challenging business. You know, we've gotten to where we own about half the real estate that we run today, and we invest in security in that real estate when we own it. We try to when we lease it as well, but it becomes a little bit more difficult to integrate it with the rest of the systems that we have in the business. And you know, Phil's been instrumental in making sure that the transportation management system that we have is integrated with the warehouse management system that tracks the inventory through the process. So you got thoughts about how you've done that?
You know, I think that, again, we're very vertically integrated, right? Whenever you can own the process from start to finish, we have some operations that, you know, they want, you know, a company to do the lumping, they want a company to do the warehouse function, and then you do the transportation. Whenever we can handle it from start to finish, it really makes it much easier, you know, to prevent those. Because you get into a lot of this, you know,
Who's responsible?
Who's responsible for the theft? And if you've got one throat to choke, then it makes it much easier.
It's theft, it's service issues, like who's responsible, it's detention.
Yep.
You know, oftentimes the person that's causing the detention isn't the person paying the freight bill.
Right.
And then it's like, well, how do I prove that that driver was there or followed some process? And I think a lot of shippers take advantage of that.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few discussions with our clients along those lines, and you know, we've picked up business because of that. You know, we went to the table and we said, we will be responsible. And, you know, by integrating that process, you know, vertically, our clients have a lower cost because they're paying one profit for the business, right? They're not paying a profit to every single contractor that's along the way.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of value with that with our clients.
I think you mentioned the one throat to choke is a really important element, because then particularly larger companies where they have, you know, smaller supply chain operations, really want in sort of the modern economy to outsource a lot of the mechanics of running these businesses. And that gives you guys a nice advantage of having the warehouse. It's interesting how, in the old days, 30 years ago, having separate vendors, warehouse operations, you mentioned owning the real estate, which has become an incredibly hot sector, just looking at how successful Prologis has been at building and acquiring. But it seems like that we're back to, in a post-COVID world where staffing is tight and we're so resource constrained that having single source operations is now coming back into vogue.
It is challenging, but when we develop a relationship with a client, we try to talk to them about not how productive we are today, how productive are we going to be over the long period of time, in a long-term relationship. Some of our clients we've worked with for 38 years. And it's because we continue to add value. Either we're adding robotics into the operations to remove personnel from the process, to make it more ergonomic in the way we're loading trailers or the way we're packaging out products. By owning the real estate, when we talk to a client, we're not raising their rent every year. We don't have to, because we have it in a business plan. This is how we're going to pay it off. When we deal with leased real estate, we're dealing with that constant increase in cost every year that they're delivering to us. Yeah. And that's another part of the model that we have, is to try to, understand what the client's really driven, what they're driven by, and develop a logistics model that'll fit their needs.
A lot of conversation has been about America reshoring. You've got high exposure to the automotive space. Automotive has been one of the industries over the last couple of decades that have, whether it's the chicken tax or other things that have been driving those elements, is bringing a lot of manufacturing back to the U.S. We saw with the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act, of building manufacturing production in the U.S. But there's also this, Donald Trump has threatened pretty substantial tariffs on China with the goal of reindustrializing the economy. What is your view of manufacturing, having a lot of sort of interest in that, of it coming back to the U.S.? Is this going to happen?
I think it will. One of our clients, they had outsourced their operation to Mexico. And by understanding their business, we sat down and we said, look, what we can do is we can do the operation that you're doing in Mexico, and we'll do it right here in this DC. And they said, well, you don't know how to do that. And I said, well, I didn't know how to drive a forklift when I started this company either. So, we figured it was just logoing golf balls, right? Custom logo. Whatever your age is, we'd logo your age on the ball, put your school on the side of it. And they were paying for that freight to ship it all the way to Mexico, ship it all the way back. And the cycle time to provide the client their logoed ball was, close to a week. Wow. Well, we shortened that down to 1 day, right? Saved the client cost, brought it all in-house, and delivered more value to the business that way.
And did it on a print-on-demand basis.
Right. So I think if we understand, some of the customers we have, they've got tremendous logistics issues because they've separated their process in multiple locations, and it costs them a lot more money shipping their freight around. When you got Class 55 freight, it's going to cost you a lot of money to ship that around the country. So I think manufacturers in the United States have got to go back to single locations where they can develop a product and understand what is the delivery time to their customers, whether it be 1-2 days, what's their model to fulfill the customer's needs, and make sure that they got manufacturing facilities close to that.
Well, the nice part about that is that the risks, the geopolitical risk, whether we're talking conflict overseas, that isn't a factor if it's sourced in the United States. Like, you're not risking moving cargo over these long voyages because you've got it right there. I imagine in this economy, particularly with some of the geopolitical tension, that is becoming far more attractive to companies.
Yeah, we have a client that we actually, because of the concern of the delay of the containers, will actually, they bring all their containers in 6 months in advance, and we're storing those parts and those components. We're stacking the containers and just waiting for that when they need that part. Where, I mean, that's an added cost to your point. If we're producing those parts and we're producing that I mean, all the downtime that it takes, and all the dwell time, to get it here, it costs money. So,
But it's a resilience factor.
right,
And are you seeing that become a bigger priority post-COVID than what companies were considering before?
yeah, I think so. I mean, don't you?
It is. There's
Yeah.
no doubt. I mean, that particular client, we're handling what you got 500-600 containers now,
Yeah.
stacked 5 high, and supporting a plant that's continually using these parts because they can't rely upon that supply chain. So manufacturers are going to move towards how do I move some of that assembly closer to me?
Whether it's a strike or there's a delay, and we've seen the delays, with some of the ships getting over here. I mean, for various different reasons. So I mean, it's
Hyundai in Montgomery, Alabama, is a great model. They've developed a new manufacturing car plant down there, and a lot of their tier ones are right around their plant now, and they're not having to rely upon overseas shipments to fulfill their manufacturing needs.
Yeah, I think that's going to become a much bigger priority just because of all the tension. I mean, we've seen just overnight, it looks like Russia used an ICBM, non-nuclear, to actually sort of demonstrate that they are willing to escalate as we've seen geopolitical tensions. The Houthis in the Red Sea is another sort of example of that. Taiwan, China, I think everyone's asking us. Speaking of the election, because we've talked a lot about politics, unfortunately in our industry, supply chain, you can't avoid it as a topic because it is such a big deal. Donald Trump has talked about tariffs. How are you guys feeling about the freight economy post-election?
Your thoughts on
The loaded question to close our day.
Yeah, I think it's a crapshoot. I think that right now a lot of the pricing we're seeing is not sustainable, which is going to cause a
Low or high when you say?
Low, extremely.
Just freight rates
Yes.
are low.
So I think what that's going to do, which we see it every day, bankruptcies of trucking companies. I mean, the survival rate right now, it's just a tough market. And I think that that's going to create a deficit of carriers, which in return, I think it's going to, next year, my opinion is I think we're going to see a lot of improvements on what is a tough market right now.
Yeah.
So
I think, the objective is to get the United States to realize that we've got an incredible labor pool here, smart people, and we can manufacture anything that is manufactured anywhere else in the world, and we can do it here effectively. But we got to start thinking longer term. And the Japanese have done that very effectively. And I think here in the United States, we're going to have the benefit of this tariff to take that opportunity to start thinking long term. And when I say long term, we've got to think 30 years with our business plan. We can't think 5 years, we can't think 3 years, and we can't let the stock market determine how we're going to run our business.
Right.
Yeah, you guys being a private company have the sort of luxury of sitting out every quarter. You can make those long-term plans. The American economy is not built for that. Most public companies are thinking, every CEO is thinking about quarter by quarter. You make a really interesting point. The Japanese have thought about that. The Chinese, one of the reasons they're so successful is they're thinking decades out, something that we need to do. And I do think, to your point, the tariffs will change the incentive structure, where now CEOs recognize that investors expect them to think about tariffs, because if they don't, and think about these long-term plans, if they don't, there's going to be a massive penalty to them long-term. And I think that's a really interesting sort of storyline.
And it's, Mexico is going to be a big player in that regard.
I agree. You talked about cross-border.
A lot of the foreign countries, you can already see it with China coming into South America, with the new ports on the west coast there, in Peru and Chile. And we're seeing more manufacturers from foreign countries move into Mexico. So being able to do that cross-border traffic coming up from those South American and Central American countries, it's going to be important going forward.
Yeah, and I think Donald Trump's USMCA was his policy, so hopefully he'll use that, I think, to protect we've talked about this a lot, is he's probably going to put pressure on Mexico to protect the border and use that more so than he is on changing trade policy. And we still need trade. I mean, trade's important to our life. Since you guys are last up, I've got to ask the question, Phil, is the Great Freight Recession over?
You know, like I said, I can't see it getting worse. I mean, we've hit a bottom. You know, I think the strong will survive. I think right now, if you've survived this market, I'm a true believer that it's got to turn around here in the near future.
Yeah, certainly reduction of capacity.
Yeah.
It's definitely happening.
Yeah.
Barry, your bold call for the next 5 years? Anything that you want to make a bold observation to close our audience out?
I think we're going to see a slowdown in business for probably the next 6 to 12 months. And then after that 12 months, I think business is going to pick back in the United States. And I think the freight recession will end in probably another 12 months.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to continue to see more capacity taken out of the market. It's just too easy to get into business, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a great closing thoughts. We appreciate you guys coming. Enjoy your time in chat. You staying around for a bit?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.